Mallory Lewis is the Emmy Award-winning daughter of ventriloquist Shari Lewis and the current performer of Lamb Chop. She's also an author who, along with Nat Segloff, just released a book called Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television. I talk with Mallory Lewis about this new biography that examines the joys, sorrows, triumphs, and sheer hard work that gave Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop their enduring star power on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Well, Mallory Lewis, welcome back to Under the Puppet.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here, and I just told you before we started recording that I just read your new book. It's called Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television, and I have to say, it's really fantastic. It's really great.
Thank you.
And I want to get into a little bit about the history, your mom's history and stuff. I did want to ask, you co-wrote the book with Nat Segloff. Can you talk about how you first met Nat and how you decided to write this book together?
Nat and I met in the early 90s when he was producing for A&E, the biography series. And we've remained friends. He was very good friends with my Aunt Barbara and my Uncle Lan Oken. And I have no idea why it took us this long to go, hey, let's do a biography on Mom, because Nat has written, I don't know, dozens of biographies. He's very prolific. He did the lion's share of the work on this. I had the stories and he had the attention span to sit at a computer. So it was a real pleasure working with Nat. He is funny and smart, and this was a very intimate biography for him because he knew all the players.
Well, and I would say that this is probably was an intimate biography for you, since it's not only a story about your mom and her career, but it's the story of your life.
Yes, it was. It's amazing how many things you don't remember about your own life, and the questions that you forgot to ask your parents. What was nice for me is I always find that people really do a disservice to themselves and to celebrities by taking them at face value. And yes, my mother was a nice lady. Yes, my mother did play with puppets. That's about 10% of who my mother was. My mother was a fully actualized human being. Right. She had likes, she had dislikes. She was highly political, very liberal. She was a dancer. She conducted symphonies. She wrote 60 books. She was a wife. No marriage is perfect. I mean, mine is right now, but we've only had each other 5 years. And I hope that having this as a late marriage, we'll probably be dead before we don't like each other. Because right now it's blissful. But, no marriage is perfect, but Mom persevered. She had health. And then she didn't have health. And then she had health again. And then she didn't have health again. She had a teenage daughter, which everyone knows is just a thrill a minute. She had great career highs and great career lows. Certainly her life was better than most people's lives. She was born into a loving family of magicians and musicians. They supported her emotionally, and in terms of the training that she got. They were a very loving family, and that's a great start for anyone's life. And really her life, as outlined in Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television, available on Amazon. Her life was a rich one and a good one.
Yeah, I love it's great, because one of my next questions was how supportive your grandparents were to her. And early on in the book, there's a quote from Shari that her dad was like jumping up and down after she had done her first solo show as a kid. And I just thought it's just amazing how
he never used her as his assistant.
Right.
He taught her at 3. She had her own 3-minute act and then a 5-minute act. And he was a feminist. So he didn't believe, although I think that had he had a son, his focus would have gone to his son. But he believed that his Shari could do anything. And he she embodied that belief.
Yeah. Well, and another amazing story there was I'm just this whole interview is going to be me saying this was amazing when I read this, but that your mom started performing, at such a young age, but that she would even go on long train trips to go
Oh
perform
yeah.
by herself.
So, well, that was back in an era when you could put an 8-year-old girl on a train in New York, and they would get met at the train in Philadelphia, and you would not have to be concerned that anything untoward would happen to your little girl along the way.
Yeah, yeah, it's just
Uh,
unbelievable. Like, just imagine her 8 years old with all the props and
with a
everything.
big trunk, I can completely see it,
Yeah,
and woe the person to try to mess with mom.
that's true. That's true. They might have wind up in the trunk.
Yes, with a
Um,
hand up there, you know.
exactly. Well, in the book and in the interviews, in interviews your mom did, she said that it was a leg break. She had broken her leg.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't know if that's a true story.
right. That's what I was going to ask about because you talk about that in the book.
Yeah, I mean that I was raised thinking that someone who was a friend of my grandfather's had given mom lamb chop. And that's not the case. As it turned out, there's a woman named Ethel who was a famous felt worker, and an artisan. And either mom approached Ethel, or Ethel, once everyone is gone, it is hard to find the truth.
Right. I also wanted to ask about that Ethel thing. We're kind of going in chronological here. We're making a little jump, but that information about where lamb chop came from didn't surface until regularly recently, right?
Oh, while we were writing the book.
Yeah.
And her son reached out to me, and my first thought when he reached out to me was, yeah, right. Because like I've had people on Facebook go, I am your brother. I am your younger brother. That was my particular favorite, 10 years younger than I am. So I would have just somehow missed my mother's pregnancy. And the guy's like, yeah, see all these pictures of me with Shari. Well, she was clearly at a performance. She takes pictures with people. And so I said to the guy, I'm like, okay, well, spit in a cup, 23 and me. If you pop up, great. Love to have a younger sibling.
Yeah.
Obviously, that never happened. So when Carl, Ethel's son, first approached me, I was like, yeah, sure, your mommy made lamb chop. And then it turned out, of course, he was 100% right. And I was glad I hadn't sent back a snarky response. So,
Yeah. Well, it's just one of the, really interesting things in the book, revelations, I guess, as you were writing this. And I love that at the end of the book, you even have like kind of a copy of her patent information as well.
yep. And a whole bunch of lamb recipes from my mother.
Yes, I'm gonna ask. You're jumping ahead. You're scooping all my questions that I was gonna ask because I think it's the only biography in the world, except for maybe Julia Child, that ends with lamb recipes.
Well, our family likes to say lamb has been feeding us for years. So,
Yeah. Well, if not only is it a great biography, it's a recipe book as well. You can get a lot of recipes. Another great thing that I think I don't know that is really important about your mom's history is who possibly her first ventriloquism teacher was.
yes,
John W. Cooper.
that one is true, I believe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that times out right, and that's what mom always said, and we're gonna lean into her hanging out in the park learning ventriloquism.
Well, yeah, it's just an important piece of history. I just love the other thing I love about this book is that you have it's written in a very unique style where it's a biography, but then there's sort of these little interjections or sidebars with extra information from you and from interviews that your mom did and from other people.
I didn't want to do a he said, she said, and then Shari said. So we just sort of grabbed direct quotes, and a lot of times I have had memories that related to whatever period we were writing about in her life that would have seemed odd stuck into the manuscript in a traditional way. So, and the lamb chop, of course, had her own opinions. So,
Right. Right. And she gets her say at the very end of the book as well.
indeed.
Yeah. Well, the first TV show your mom did was Facts and Fun in 1953. She was only 20 years old, and it only lasted a few months. But then, in just a few years, she was creating two shows at the same time with Lan Oken, your uncle, and doing 6 hours of television a week. And that is just an unbelievable schedule.
She was so happy. She loved performing more than anything. And she wanted, if she could have been on TV every day, well, she pretty much was on TV with, aside from small periods where she wasn't, but she loved entertaining and she loved being famous.
Yeah. I also love that from the start, your mom was very concerned that the shows have some sort of educational aspect to it.
Yes, both of her parents were teachers. And my grandfather taught magic to the bad boys to get them turned in a more positive direction. And he always felt that he taught math with magic also. Kind of funny because neither my mom nor I were any good at math, but everything, mom really believed in the value of children. And she felt that any time that they are doing anything, it should have an educational aspect, that there was no time to waste. She is quoted as saying that children are our only known source of adults. So it behooves us to invest in our children because they are truly the future.
Yeah, well, and that's something she carried with her through her whole life and all the shows she did, and even testifying before the the subcommittee.
FCC,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. In the book, you're quoted as saying, "As mom loved being a children's entertainer, but given her choice, she would have been a performer for adults." And I
Not
know that
that kind, not an adult performer.
right, yes, of course, of course.
But
Um,
although if you saw the pictures of her in Playboy bunny costumes during that era, perhaps she would have leaned into that. Who knows?
No, but like more she would have created shows more for adults. And I was wondering, I know she did nightclub acts and she did Vegas and some other venues for adults and would be slightly blue. But to your knowledge, did your mom ever want to develop a show that was an
Oh,
adult
she
show?
did develop many, many shows, but what the world wanted from Shari Lewis was not what Shari Lewis necessarily wanted from the world. The world wanted a nice lady playing with puppets.
Right.
And people have very strong opinions about what my mother would or wouldn't have believed or done. I performed at the Magic Castle and did a drunk routine with Lamb Chop. And this woman comes up to me afterwards and goes, "Your mother would have been horrified by that routine." I looked at the woman, I'm like, "Madam, my mother wrote that routine."
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but we're obviously in a very political time right now, and I am very outspoken about how what wrongs I perceive at any rate. And people say, "Oh, your mother would have been horrified that you're interjecting politics," and I'm like, no, she wouldn't. I mean, I have reams of footage of mom being highly political
Yeah.
back in the day. And sometimes people will say to me, "Your material is so much more contemporary than your mom's." And I say thank you. I wrote for her then. I write for Lamb Chop now. Of course my mom wouldn't have made a Donald Trump joke. He didn't exist.
Right.
It was a
Right.
simpler, better time.
Yeah.
But it's I love the fact that people have such a strong opinion about mom and treasure her and treasure Lamb Chop. This book, I think, really it it covers not just mom's story, but the story of America at that time. It's a story of mom was one of the first two women to have their own production company, Lucille Ball and mom. Now, mind you, mom was hugely famous in the 60s, could not open a bank account legally until the 70s, could not get a credit card without a male signing for her until the 70s. We think of that as ancient history, but I didn't realize. I mean, I was born in, well, let's go with my Facebook age. I was born in 72. Hard to believe that I had years on this planet where that, and that really hasn't changed for women now. Yes, we can get credit cards. We don't have agency over our own bodies,
Hmm.
which in the 70s we did. No, the Equal Rights Amendment has not been passed. It has been ratified in 30 38 states. How many do we need for it to be ratified in? 38. It just hasn't been published. So mom had a very feminist battle to fight just for equality. And it's kind of sad that 24 years after her death, our country's gone backwards, not forwards. Every woman will relate to her story. She was a working mother. People constantly say to me, was it hard having your mom work when you were a kid? I'm like, it wasn't hard having my mom work. It wasn't hard having my dad work. Why does nobody ask, was it hard that your daddy wasn't there when you came home from school? Because why is that any different? But my mom didn't drive carpools and she didn't cook. She was very busy working. And I find it very interesting that people always look at that as something that I had to endure. Nobody goes, did your daddy drive carpool? So it's a feminist story. And that's, I think, all I have to say on that particular subject.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's very clear in the book that, your mom was very busy, but she gave you everything you needed, including time. Because you
Yeah.
talk about times where you would come home and she would stop whatever she's doing to sit and chat with you.
Yep. And we'd talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and then she'd say, Mommy has to go back to work.
Yeah.
So my mom used to work in her bedroom on her bed because it was the world. She was very flexible, so she could sit cross-legged for endless amounts of hours. But her bed would be covered in papers, and there'd be a pile of scripts, there'd be a pile of correspondence, there'd be different piles, and she put down her pen, talk to me, and then go back to work. I guess most people can't say their mother worked from bed without it meaning something totally different, but
Yeah.
that's where she worked.
Yeah. Well, speaking of carpool, another tidbit I found interesting was that your mom never learned to drive, and she kind of thought it was a waste of time.
Yes, well, it would have been, because if she had known how to drive, then somebody would have said, can you do carpool? But mom was just like, sorry, don't drive.
Right. Right. It kind of said in the book that it made people come to her so she could keep working and,
Yep.
people would have to come to her. It's
She
really
did not
genius.
waste any time going to people. People came to her. The house was always filled with people, and currently we have 2 house guests at our house. But when we were reading, Nat and I, that section where mom was talking about how people came to her, we were sitting in my house. I had dinner on the table. Nat had come to me, and just like mom always had hot and cold running food for people, I always have hot and cold running food. Jewish mother, you got to feed. A spare bed and extra toilet paper in the bathroom.
Perfect. Well, I was going to actually start this interview by asking about the choice of David Copperfield to write the foreword for the book, and then the answer presented itself near the end of the book that you say that David is responsible for the preservation of some of the most important items in your mom's
My
archives.
grandpa, I believe my grandpa taught David magic when David was a little boy.
Okay.
And so when mom passed, David reached out and said, he's got a wonderful private museum in Vegas, and he has a wonderful display that I've gifted him with some pieces for that. And he offered to take care of all the tapes and everything, because you have to keep tapes at a controlled temperature. It's expensive. I mean, there was a lot of tapes, and
Right.
to pay one of the facilities to, I don't have a shrine room in my house. Where am I going to keep mom's 13 Emmys?
Right.
On display as if they're mine, or a shrine room, or so there's a lot of memorabilia and stuff that David has preserved for me, and I'm very grateful. He we had to go take it back for a little while because we have a documentary on mom coming out this spring, which I'm
Excellent.
very excited about. And of course, we needed some of it for research for Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, the team that changed children's television, available on Amazon.
Well, of course, the book covers the production of Lamb Chops Play Along, which you were very much involved in. And one story that I thought was really funny, that as the producer on the show, you sort of bribed your mom to stay on schedule when you were shooting. And she was kind of taking a
Well,
little bit too long.
well, what it was mom wanted everything to be perfect. And she really set the pace. She was an incredible hard worker. She was at the studio. We actually got yelled at by Sean Williamson, who was my producing partner. He called us both into his office and he said, the two of you need to stop getting here so early. You're making the craft service girl cry because she can't get here, So, and mom worked, but puppets take time. As you know, they don't move on their own.
Right.
And so what I would say is, okay, if we are on schedule at the end of the first episode, I don't have to use the $10,000 of contingency for that episode. It's not like it goes into my pocket if we don't use it. So you can have it for the next episode for something special that you want. Green screen was hideously expensive back then. We once threw a stick, bone, something for Hush Puppy across green screen. And it was $10,000 in the big edit suite with the expensive. I could do that on my phone now,
Right.
But back then the simplest of green screen was very, very expensive. And it wasn't quite a bribe. It was more that I showed her the benefits of she worked as fast as she could work, but it was nice to be able to say to her, if we don't touch the contingency, it's yours for the next episode.
Yeah.
You want that pink elephant? Okay.
Well, the other thing I love about the book, I mean, there's so much stuff, but is that you got comments and quotes from Pat Brymer, who sadly passed before the book and came away. But it was just so great to read stuff about Pat, because I know how much she loved working with your mom and with you.
My son used to call him Pat Bwyma, and it's actually Brymer, but he was 3. And Uncle Dimmy, who was Uncle Jimmy, Pat's partner of 50 years. Pat was a much beloved part of our family, and he is so sorely missed.
Yeah. He was. I met him a few times, and just always a wonderful person to be around. I wanted to ask you, your mom, she learned to do everything as a kid: singing, dancing, playing instruments, magic, to just name a few. And people talk about, being a triple threat. She was like a sextuple threat, if not more, times a million. And I think that's something like today in entertainment you don't see. Like, you may see somebody who's an actor and they sing or something like that. Do you think that is a different era, or do you think performers these days?
I think that these days celebrities tend to design undergarments, or have a makeup line,
Right.
as their additional skill set. I think in the old days, people, the performers that last are the ones who are consistently nice to their fans and who are actually talented. So, I mean, I've never understood celebrities who were like, oh, I can't even go to the mall with my kids, because people come up to me. Well, okay. But my mom's attitude was, if you don't want people to talk to you in public, maybe you should be a dry cleaner, because very rarely do dry cleaners get harassed at the mall, unless it's somebody going, hey, you didn't get the stain out of my blouse,
Right.
So she was very grateful to be a celebrity, and she leaned into that. And, a lot of the older performers came up through vaudeville or on the fringe of vaudeville. But I see some wonderful content on TikTok. I mean, I find it really interesting how talented people are. And it's a little frustrating as a professional performer, because you have to be on TikTok. I'm at your fave lamb chop on TikTok, FAV. And so I'm now producing free content.
Right.
So, well, I kind of like getting paid for content, but we had one go viral the other day, which was great. And Lamb Chop hit number 7 on Twitter a couple of months ago. I had nothing to do with that. Some guy named Christopher posted something about Lamb Chop, and the internet blew up. And my phone that morning, everyone was texting me, "Oh my God, have you seen what's going on Twitter?" My first thought was, "Oh dear God, what did I do last night?" But turned out it had nothing to do with me, probably better. But yeah, no, there's like, Jax on TikTok, the girl who wrote the Victoria's Secret. I know Victoria. She's brilliant. And there's so many really wonderful young performers that it's great to watch. It's a egalitarianization of performance.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's like, if you have an idea for something, you can record it and do it, Yeah.
Do it. Don't talk about it. Do it. Yeah, particularly because our phones give us the power of a studio.
Yeah. Well, I recently interviewed on the show Craig Shemin, who was the author of a new book about Sam and Friends, which was Jim Henson's first television show. And we talked at that time about how Jim and his wife Jane, when they were doing that show, they sort of grew up while television was growing up, starting in black and white and moving through color. And I think your mom kind of did the same thing, growing up on television.
One of the reasons she was so famous is when she started, there were 3 channels.
Right.
No, a third of the people were watching Mom at all times, when she was on. So, and she invented a certain kind of performance style. Very much. It was an interesting time in the world, and I kind of feel like TikTok is like 1950s television in that there's such a wide variety of what's going on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see what sticks.
Yeah.
Mom's stuck. Most of the channels had like the weather guy introducing cartoons, and you don't remember their names, but true talent rises, cream rises, I guess.
Right. So, well, and your mom also kind of did the same thing for home video too, when home video was just starting.
Well, all platforms start with porn.
Right.
Literally. I mean, from, the internet sites but Mom was one of the first non-pornographic things in home video. Certainly one of the earliest created for home video content. Because prior to that, it was television shows that had been on that they put on home video, and movies that they put on home video.
Right. Yeah. And I really love that section of the book where it talks about how, I guess only Disney was kind of doing it at the time, but they saw it as a gamble. But your mom right away saw it as like, no, we got to do this. This will be great.
We got to do it. Well, she would have been all over TikTok.
Yeah.
She would have been, there would have been a constant green screen would have been up always in the house. She's very, very focused, very driven. And I feel sorry for people of my age who say things like, "Oh, I don't keep up with TikTok or all of this, that." And it's like, well, the world moves on. And if you don't move on with the world moves on without you.
Yeah.
And Mom would not have let the world move on without her. Right. I have not been as diligent by any means as she was, but I love performing with Lamb Chop. But I love horseback riding. I've just taken up barrel racing. I used to do more English. I love scuba diving. I love cooking. I love my husband. I love travel. So although I love performing with Lamb Chop, it is not the focus of my life.
Right. Right. Well, let me ask this as we start to wrap up here. What's the biggest lesson about having a successful career that you took away from writing this book?
If you plan on having, and this is a direct quote from Mom, if you plan on having a long career, you're going to have to keep reinventing yourself, which cycles back to what I was just saying. Yeah. If you have to. Mom also said, beautiful girls don't age as well because when they look in the mirror, they see themselves as still young and beautiful. And she said, every year on your birthday, you look in the mirror, you should do is look in the mirror and go, okay, what has happened and what needs to be changed. What now, that was a rather old-fashioned way of looking at aging, but even though we give a lot of lip service now to body positivity, and all they sell on TikTok is skincare creams and the most amazing new foundation, and so I don't want to be too politically correct, but yeah, you got to keep reinventing yourself. You got to keep looking at what you're doing, how it relates to popular culture, how it relates, what new mediums there are. And mom also was very true to herself. A lot of times people go, well, what kind of scandals happened? And I'm like, there were no scandals. I mean, she didn't drink, she didn't do drugs. In many ways, she was the person that people think she was, a nice little lady who plays with puppets, but mostly she was incredibly focused and hardworking, and she was multi-dimensional. She was a wife, she was a mother, she was a daughter, she was an entertainer, she was a businesswoman. So she loved dirty jokes, loved them. So a guy goes roustabout. It's his first day working at the circus, and he goes to the circus manager and he says, "What's my job?" Circus manager says, "Well, you got to get the elephants to poop backstage before they go on stage." Roustabout says, "Well, how do I do that?" And the manager says, "Well, you take a broom handle, you stick it where the sun don't shine. The elephant will go run in a circle and poop." Roustabout is very dubious about this, but he goes to the elephant enclosure right before the show, decides to start with the youngest elephant. The youngest elephant is 2. First day at the circus, he takes the broom handle, sticks it where the sun don't shine. The elephant runs in a circle and poops. Now he is encouraged by this. So now he moves on to the medium-aged elephant, who's 10. He's been with the circus for 6 years. Takes the broom handle, sticks it where the sun doesn't shine, runs around in a circle, poops, and now he goes to the old elephant. The old elephant is 35. The old elephant has been with the circus for 35 years. So he takes the broom handle, sticks it where the sun don't shine. The elephant goes, "Whoa!" So how's the house? Which every performer knows. You're backstage. The last thing you say to the stage manager is, "How's the house?" So mom would have loved that joke. And that's my new favorite joke. And I think I managed to make it PG.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, the book is called Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television by Nat Segloff and our guest, Mallory Lewis. It's out now wherever books are available. And Mallory, just thank you so much for being on the show.
I always enjoy talking to you. Can we do this again when the documentary comes out?
Absolutely. We'll book it right now. It's already
fantastic. Booked. As soon as I have a date. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoys the book.
My thanks to Mallory Lewis for being on the show. For links to some of the things we discussed, as well as to the brand new book about Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, check out the show notes for this episode number 77, over at underthepuppet.com. And to hear a special bonus interview with none other than Lamb Chop, download the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android and click on the gift icon in the listing for this episode. Now it's time to announce the winner of episode 76's giveaway for a one-of-a-kind critter puppet by David Stevens. The question was, who signed Craig Shemin's glove after a Jim Henson Company softball game? And the answer was Jim Henson and Frank Oz. And the winner is Mike Grandizio. Congratulations, Mike. Your puppet is on the way. This episode, we are giving away another puppet, an Inner Monster kit by puppeteer Jamie Shannon, who we interviewed back on episode 29. This little kit includes everything you need to sew your very own hand puppet or inner monster. You supply 1 to 2 hours of crafting and a pair of scissors, and soon you'll release your inner monster puppet. To be entered to win, all you have to do is answer this question from the episode you just heard. What profession does Mallory Lewis say rarely gets harassed at the mall? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by November 15th, 2022. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the December 2022 episode of the show. One entry per household, and due to recent issues shipping the prizes to winners, these giveaways are now only open to listeners with a mailing address in the United States. Good luck! Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. I want to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Scott Armstrong, Vicky Sebring, David Akers, Tony Urbano, Brandy, Kathy Crawford, Eve Cunning, and Dorothy Pachoco. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604 or click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send your feedback via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and featured music by Dan Ring. Help spread the word about the show by sharing your favorite Under the Puppet episode with a friend. Under the Puppet is copyright 2022 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.